The 10,000-hour rule might be the biggest myth of our time. A Nobel Prize-winning scientist spent decades studying how we actually learn, and eventually, he boiled it all down to a simple mathematical formula. Reaching high-level proficiency may not require 10,000 hours. His model suggests a much smaller number, roughly 417 hours of focused practice. Break it down, that's less than 70 days at 6 hours a day. Even with review and consolidation, 6 months is a very realistic timeline. 6 months. From beginner to real competence. This might sound exaggerated, but the framework is grounded in decades of research in cognitive science. By the end of this video, you'll walk away with a clear step-by-step method to help your brain learn faster and remember longer. You'll discover why some one-shot learners retain information forever, while others spiral in a constant cycle of forgetting. But first, I need to challenge you with one uncomfortable question. Could it be that everything you've called studying for years was never actually learning? Ask yourself this: when was the last time you actually mastered a new skill? Not something you just watched or heard about, but something you can actually do. For many, the only answers are things like getting a driver's license, or even further back, learning to ride a bike as a kid. Here's the paradox: we consume more information than ever, dozens of books, hundreds of videos, yet we seem to retain less and less. Why is that? Simon's research points to an uncomfortable truth: you're not actually learning, you're just simulating the act of learning. He calls this state the illusion of competence. The highlighted lines, saved articles, and screenshots create a false signal, tricking your brain into thinking you've already mastered the material. But the knowledge never actually enters your long-term memory. It simply travels from your eyes to your fingertips, and then vanishes. Researchers at Stanford ran a simple experiment. They split students into 2 groups and gave them the same material to study. Group A read the text 4 times. Group B read it once, then closed the book and tried to explain what they remembered. A week later, they ran a test. The results? Group B remembered 3 times as much as Group A. In other words, reading something again and again feels productive, but forcing yourself to recall it is far more effective. But here's the real question: why do we instinctively choose the easier path even when it's completely ineffective? Because rereading is effortless. But active recall? That's real mental work. It demands a massive amount of cognitive energy. Your brain is a cognitive miser. It will always seek the path of least resistance. So you end up spinning your wheels in an illusion of productivity. It feels like hard work, but your brain isn't fooled. What's worse is that this illusion of learning has a dangerous side effect: it slowly fuels a sense of anxiety. You start to feel like you know a little bit of everything, but you've mastered absolutely nothing. You keep taking in more and more information, but your actual ability barely moves. So here's the million-dollar question. Herbert Simon claims you can become an expert in 6 months, but how can he be so sure? It turns out there's a formula behind this, one most people completely overlook. Simon didn't just pull that 6-month figure out of thin air. He actually crunched the numbers. As a Nobel Prize winner and a pioneer of AI, Simon spent decades asking one question: what are the absolute limits of human learning? His research led to a surprising conclusion: it takes the human brain roughly 30 seconds to internalize what he called a chunk of information. So what exactly is a chunk? Think of it as a unit of knowledge your brain can treat as a single piece. For example, the Pythagorean theorem is a chunk. The principle that supply and demand determine prices, that's another chunk. Simon estimated that to become an expert in a field, you need to master roughly 50,000 of these chunks. Now, let's do the math. 50,000 chunks times 30 seconds equals 1.5 million seconds. That works out to about 417 hours. If you put in 6 hours of focused study per day, you're looking at just 70 days. And that's just pure learning time. Once you factor in review, consolidation, and the forgetting curve, 6 months is actually a very conservative estimate. You might be wondering, if the math is that simple, why do so many people spend 6 or even 10 years on something and still never become experts? The answer is simple: their study time is mostly fake. They spend 20 minutes scrolling on their phones, another 10 minutes daydreaming, and by the end, they're posting on social media just to prove they were studying. Out of that entire hour, their real learning time? Maybe 15 minutes, tops. This brings us to the first core insight of the Simon method: it's not that you aren't studying long enough, it's that your real learning time is too short. Renowned psychologist Anders Ericsson found that the key difference between elite violinists and average players was the amount of deliberate practice they put in. Top performers practiced for about 4 hours a day. Not 8, not 10, just 4. Beyond that point, the brain hits a wall of protective fatigue and your efficiency just falls off a cliff. So the first rule of the Simon method is simple: stop pretending to study for 8 hours. Instead, commit to 4 to 6 hours of high-intensity focus. But here's the thing: even if you put in the time, why does it just not stick for some people, while others seem to remember it for a lifetime? The answer lies in how your brain actually encodes and stores information. For most people, learning is fragmented and unfocused. But the core of the Simon method is a strategy called saturation attack. Simon discovered that the real gap between experts and everyone else isn't IQ, it's their ability to chunk. What does that mean? Most people's brains are like a messy warehouse. Knowledge is scattered all over the floor, and when it really matters, they can't find a thing. An expert's brain, on the other hand, is like a precision-tuned library. Every piece of information is indexed, stored on a specific shelf, and mapped out to everything else. When learning the same concept, an average person memorizes an isolated definition. But an expert? They see how that concept hooks into 10 other ideas. Here's the classic proof. Researchers showed masters and beginners a real chess position for just 5 seconds and then asked them to reconstruct the board. The masters were 90% accurate. The beginners? Barely 20%. But here's the twist: when the pieces were placed randomly, with no meaningful structure, the masters performed just as poorly as the beginners. What does this tell us? It's not that masters have extraordinary memories. They've just learned to encode positions into meaningful chunks. Where a beginner sees isolated pieces, a master sees a single chunk that captures the relationships between 5 or 6 pieces at once. The bigger your chunks, the more information you can pull up at once. Your thinking speeds up, and your decisions become razor-sharp. This is why experts always seem to cut straight to the heart of the problem. It's not just that they're smarter, it's that their brain has highly compressed these chunks. In a single second, they can process what would take an average person a full hour to even wrap their head around. So, how do you actually build these chunks? Simon laid out 3 specific paths to get you there. First, understanding. Rote memorization only creates scattered parts. Only when you truly grasp the underlying principles does knowledge start to click and organize itself automatically. Second, deliberate connection. Every time you learn something new, ask yourself, how does this hook into what I already know? Force those connections. Even a flawed link is better than no link at all. Third, active retrieval. It's not about rereading, it's about forcing yourself to pull information from your brain without looking at your notes. Every time you retrieve a memory, you're welding those chunks together even tighter. This is exactly why the Feynman technique is so powerful. When you try to explain a complex idea to a total beginner in plain English, you're forced to build a solid, unified chunk. The clearer the explanation, the stronger the chunk. Step 1, pick a domain that's small enough to master. This is the first trap most people fall into. They don't want to learn investing, they want to make money. They don't want to learn writing, they want to be successful. But a goal that's too big isn't a goal, it's just a fantasy. The Simon method forces you to break your field down into something you can actually execute. For example, don't try to learn economics. Start with the concept of Nash equilibrium and game theory. Don't try to learn psychology. Start with loss aversion and behavioral economics. The smaller the domain, the easier it is to build chunks, and the faster momentum kicks in. Step 2, build a knowledge map. Before you dive into studying, spend 2 or 3 hours listing out every core concept in the field. Don't worry about understanding them yet, just identify the key terms. Then map out how they relate to each other, which ones are foundational, which are advanced, and which are applied. This map becomes your strategic guide for the next 6 months. Starting without a map is like wandering through a maze blindfolded. Step 3, run the 3-block learning session. This is a core learning pattern inspired by the original research of Herbert Simon. You divide your study session into 3 30-minute blocks. Block 1, active input. Read a book. Watch a video. It doesn't matter. But you must take active notes. No passive consuming allowed. Block 2, Feynman recall. Close everything and explain what you just learned in your own words. If you get stuck, that's exactly where the gap is. Go back and fix it. Block 3, real-world stress test. Throw the knowledge into a real situation. It's okay to fail, the act of applying it is what actually builds the chunk. Take a 10-minute break between blocks. That's 1 complete learning cycle in 90 minutes. Do 2 cycles a day, about 3 hours total, and in 6 months, you can develop real expertise in an narrow field. Step 4, compress regularly. Spend 1 hour every week distilling everything you've learned into a single page. Then, once a month, compress those 4 weekly pages into 1. This act of compression is what forces scattered knowledge to reorganize itself into powerful mental chunks. After 6 months, you'll be holding a 20-page personal playbook, a compressed record of how you think in that field. Look at Elon Musk. He didn't read every aerospace textbook from cover to cover. Instead, he mapped out the field, identified the essential chunks, and let specific problems drive his learning. It took him less than 5 years to go from zero to launching reusable rockets. To become an expert in your niche? 6 months is plenty. But there's a catch. The Simon method isn't just a set of tricks, it's a radical revaluation of time. Once you realize that 6 months can actually shift your life's entire trajectory, you can no longer tolerate the illusion of effort. Here's the cold truth: the world doesn't lack information, it lacks people who can turn that information into competence. Most people are stuck in the gap between knowing and doing. They replace learning with bookmarking, and replace action with anxiety. This is Herbert Simon's greatest legacy: the human cognitive system is calculable. And if it can be calculated, it can be optimized. If it can be optimized, your fate is no longer set in stone. 6 months from today, you could be an entirely different person. The only question is, when do you start the clock? If this helped, like and subscribe. Don't just save this video, start your first block today. See you next time.